being able to operate in both sides, I think, is a privilege.
How can one cope with this as this real experience of real discrimination?
And if one forgets his roots, his culture, his traditions, then that person will become lost.
Kind of start officially, and then actually I'm moving back to this. So, well, welcome, Letlhokwa. I'm struggling with the name.
Yeah.
And this actually brings me to the first question. Letlhokwa, Mpedi, South Africa, University of Johannesburg.
Yeah.
You are now one of the really important people there.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, you are now vice president, right?
No, vice chancellor and principal. In the other context, it would be the president of the university. Remember, in our system, we've got chancellor, which is a titular role. And then you've got vice chancellor and principal, who's the head of the university. And in other contexts, it would be the university president.
And if I understood it correctly, it's a kind of merger between, it's now the University of Johannesburg. It had been, or one of the universities previously had been the virtual university where you actually studied, right?
Yeah. What happened is that I studied at the Vista University, which was a sort of a township university in the sense that it had campuses in townships, basically. And it was not a residential university in the sense that you could stay on campus. So you would attend and go home. And then what happened is that I studied at the Mamelodi, which is in Pretoria campus, but there was a Soweto campus, which is in Johannesburg. So that Soweto campus was incorporated in the Rand Afrikaans University, which was an Afrikaans university. And then the Rand Afrikaans University and the Technikon Witwatersrand were merged in 2005 to form the University of Johannesburg. So this year, Peter, we are celebrating our 20th anniversary as the University of Johannesburg.
And it is at the same time the overcoming of apartheid in terms of having, and I'm hesitating now, having a normal university that is fully acknowledged. Was it the same before, or was it, how much was it characterized by this apartheid politics? You are there, we are here, and this confrontation, which I think is for people who did not experience difficult to understand.
Yeah. The Rand Afrikaans University, it was established as an Afrikaans university for Afrikaners, middle-class Afrikaners. And tuition was largely in Afrikaans and so on, and it was predominantly white. And but it changed. It was changing over time, even before, it was evolving, because I did my master's in law at the Rand Afrikaans University, registered in 2000. When I registered my PhD, it was Rand Afrikaans University, but when I graduated, it was the University of Johannesburg. So when I was a student, we were taught in English, my master's, and examination question papers were in English and Afrikaans. And that is for my master's. And you could answer in either English or Afrikaans. But at undergraduate level, teaching was predominantly in Afrikaans, but later there were also English classes. So in terms of the evolution, today it's majority Black, although we're a multiracial university. I would say the University of Johannesburg is representative at the moment of the demographics of the country. So it was part of that evolution that we undertook and evolving with the times. Of course, we acknowledge our history and we build, on that solid foundation and evolution over the years.
And the BA or Masters previously had it been fully acknowledged internationally and in the country, or was it separate? I try to understand this apartheid.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it was complete no-go area, and at the same time, there was this kind of integration.
Yeah, no, Peter, it's fully recognized. Remember, Rand Afrikaans University was a fully fledged university, internationally recognized. Actually, some of our colleagues then, ended up being offered jobs internationally or working internationally in various industries, commerce, engineering, law, and so on. So it was a fully fledged university. It's just that when it was established many months ago, it was targeted at a particular population, but with time, then it evolved and opened up. Remember, during the apartheid period, during the height of apartheid, you needed special permission to study even at the English university if you were black, you needed special permission from the minister, relevant minister, to be admitted to study at the universities that were not, designated black in inverted commas. So there were historically black universities where we were supposed to go and study. But I'm not that old, because when I studied at the Rand Afrikaans University, you could apply and be admitted without special permission. But I've got colleagues who still remember the days when you had to write a letter asking for permission to study at the historically white university.
Yeah, I still try to understand it, because let's say there are different, correctly, different clashes of civilization.
Yeah.
To use this common phrase. And as you know, I worked in Ireland, and this is something as well I did not experience, but it had been previously the Irish. I remember seeing seeing photos of some signs in English pubs: no dogs, no Irish, which is difficult to understand, difficult to grasp. At the same time, having said this, there are still ongoing clashes, and one of your, in looking at your biography, you come from a village where nobody expected you to be at some stage lawyer, having this position, but even to study was kind of difficult to understand, and this is something I know your father wanted you to be lawyers, and still there is something. How is it? This using this phrase, yes we can, yes you can.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, I think in your inaugural speech, I am one of the privileged. Not many others didn't make this step. How was it possible for you? Yeah,
Peter, you're making an important point, because look, I won't lie to you. It was not a given that I would end up where I am. While there are people who come from families where, it's almost guaranteed that they would be able to access the university. I come from a village, 1 hour's drive north of Pretoria. And coming from there, your options are limited, if I could put it that way, in terms of what you could pursue. Firstly, I'm not from a wealthy family, although we had enough to eat, clothes on our backs, but a dream of studying at a university was just near impossible because of the costs associated with studying at a university. Because remember, education is not free, higher education is not free. And on the other hand, even if you had the resources, I had this dream of studying law because my father always said he wanted me to become the best criminal lawyer, then it was a dream. There were just few black lawyers. Mandela, who was already in prison, practice law, and so on. So at school, I stayed with that dream because he passed away when I was 6. So at school, when the teachers asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would say a lawyer, and they would say, next. And people say a teacher, a nurse, a soldier, a policeman. And say, good, good, because then that was what was common. Becoming a lawyer was not common until I went to high school, where I met my karate instructor who was studying law part-time, who could explain what it meant to study law, because people were saying a lawyer, lies in court, and then a criminal walks free, and then he laughed and then explained to me what it meant. So there were a lot of things that were stacked against me, firstly, not even having the right information, secondly, not having the resources to access the higher education sector at a later point. But it all worked out at the end. Even today, Peter, we've got many, many gifted young men and women who would do well at an institution of higher learning, but their problem or their challenge is that they do not have the resources to study or to pay for those fees. Of course, there are government interventions, but they are not enough. If you look at our university, majority of our students are part of the so-called first generation to come to university. So they don't have a parent or parents or siblings that would tell them what it is like to be at an institution of higher learning. Just quickly, Peter, to show you that, coming from this, I'm a first generation to study at a university. My older sister studied at a college, to become a teacher. And there was no one to tell me what to expect. So, Peter, I was going to university for a week, missing classes, because I was waiting for a bell to ring or for us to be called to assembly like in high school. Until one of the older gentlemen who was studying part-time said, hey, you boys are missing classes. I was like, what classes?
Is it something moving by leaving your old traditional era, or is it going to somewhere? What is the main push or pull factor?
Look, I would say it's both, I mean, Peter, one thing that I'm really grateful for is having lived, or living in both worlds. Because even when I started teaching, my students would say to me, hey, we're so grateful to have you as our professor because you bring both sides, the experiences that we would have not known. I mean, when you talk about social security law, for example, which is our field, of specialization, I would bring in the traditional social security coping mechanisms that under normal circumstances, the other side would not know. So being able to operate in both sides, I think, is a privilege. So it's both push and pull,
Well, definitely. It's something that reminds me of my situation in a different way.
Yeah.
I had been working on European studies, European integration, while I had been teaching in Ireland.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was permanently in Brussels, being engaged with NGOs and lobbying processes for social affairs and stuff. And actually, from Brussels, from one of the organizations, she said, actually, your university should pay us because you make this experience not from textbooks, but what real life is.
Wow.
Isn't that something that is lost easily or in danger to be lost when we look at this professionalization in terms of you go to good school, you come from a good socially good environment, you go to a well-acknowledged school, then you go to a well-acknowledged university, this straight career. Is that a loss or is it a gain? Gain and professionalization?
Yeah. Peter, I would say that one must know himself or herself. One must be grounded and one must be comfortable, with himself or herself. Then one will be well grounded and will be able to operate. What we're saying is critical, because we see people who become urbanized and then they forget their roots, and then they change. Then they are just confused people. So one, in navigating this complex, transitions, must always know who he is, where he or she comes from, one's roots, and then one will do well. For example, in some ways I'm a traditional man, in some ways I'm an urban man. For example, when I got married, I paid lobolo, dowry. And Peter, I wouldn't feel married if I didn't pay that. As educated as I am, as urbanized as I am, but that is extremely important to me, But you get people who say, no, that is in the past. So it's, in my view, it's about striking a balance. And it centers on knowing who one is, Look at the world now, that we operate in. Today I can engage with you now, and then change and connect with people from all over the world. It's an opportunity that we need to embrace, because we grow, it changes our perspectives. But while doing that, we should not forget who we are and not forget our roots, because that is something that grounds one, And if one forgets his roots, his culture, his traditions, then that person will become lost. So I don't see it as a conflict. I believe one can still be grounded in his values, his traditions, and still operate at a global level. And that could add, as a bonus. You know how passionate I am about our traditional sayings. And I see how people get excited to learn about my culture, my sayings, and so on. And I'm also excited to learn about other people's cultures, but without being, lost to my roots, my values, and my cultures, and my traditions.
Yeah, that's important, I think, as well, not only in professional terms, but you mentioned, or it had been mentioned in one article, the explosion of celebrations, singing and dancing in the dusty streets of the village.
Yeah.
That's this real life, everyday's life, and dancing and enjoying life, and then being shocked by, you mentioned it in this one book, being shocked by Santa Claus and his black Peter, whatever. How can one cope with this as this real experience of real discrimination?
Look, Peter, it's strange, isn't it, that the world we are living in, today, you are at peace, in living your life, and then just a short drive, you get to encounter some of these challenges. And some are really, subconscious and so on. And that leaves to tell you that in as much as take South Africa, it's 30 years since the end, or since we had, it's over 30 years since we have a democratic government, and we say apartheid is over, but we still have people who are stuck in the past. You still experience discrimination. I experience it where people, would not expect me to do certain things, and you'd see that it's because of one's skin color, not to drive a particular type of a car. If you are driving a particular type of a car, and it means, you are involved in corrupt practices, you still have subconsciously, people who still put out adverts that are still having some racial biases and so on. So it shows that as a people, we still have a long way to go. But I would say, if you were to ask me, have we made progress? I would say yes, most definitely we have made progress. Do we still have work to do? Most definitely we still have work to do. And will we eradicate all these biases and all that? Because they also come in other ways today, there are still other challenges to be contended with, gender discrimination, sexual orientation issues, and so on. So we still have a long way to go. Our great leader, Mandela, once said, racism, for example, is taught. Children are not born racists. If I could just pick on racism. And my view is that we need to continue to educate, our children to be tolerant, to be open-minded, and so on. It will take a long way, but we need to work on that. Will we completely eradicate this? No, I think it's human nature. We just need to be open-minded and continue to open each other's eyes, educate each other, and work towards peace, and mutual existence.
Well, that's an important point I wanted to ask as well. Now you have one son, and traditionally from where you come, there was this saying, you need a village to raise a child.
That's right, yeah.
Now you don't have the village anymore.
Yeah.
And there is another saying, he who talks forgets what he said, but who listens can't forget. And isn't this the values of traditional systems that we, in a way, we cannot live them anymore. We don't have the village anymore.
Yeah.
We don't have time to listen. We just have to present. How is it, especially in your position now, how to maintain this balance?
Yeah, it's tricky, Peter. I mean, being raised by a village, in my case, I mean, my father passed away when I was 6. And I remember, my uncles played that fatherly figure, men in the neighborhood, fathers, let me put it that way, would discipline anyone, myself included. So, and now in urban areas, I see my son, he wakes up and he watches television, he plays with his gadgets and so on. It's not the same anymore, but we have to move with the times. Now, in his case, of course, I make it a point that he gets to know his people. He gets to know his aunts, his grannies, from my wife's side and also from my side. And then we continue to engage. It's not the same as when I was growing up. We have to move with the times, but also make sure that, our kids understand their roots, they understand their culture, and they can interact with their culture. It's not the same at all, but also the teachings that he gets at home, that this is, traditionally, when the elders speak, you don't interrupt them, and so on. Those type of things do add. And the little time that we spent with the grannies, and he's very close to his grannies, and now, he has a phone, he phones them when he wants, and then he can still talk to them, and so on. And what I picked, he's so curious about his culture, and this traditional life, that there are things that happen during the festive season. We've got people dancing in the streets. He loves that. And every time he asks, when are they coming again? When are we going to see that? And so on. It's not the same, but it does make a difference. And also, Peter, we really need to listen more as a people. And listening is amongst peers, but also we need to listen to our children when they speak, in as much as they need to listen to us, we need to also listen to the elders, because we can all learn from each other. The problem starts when we stop listening to each other, thinking that we know, then we'll be lost as a people. This is what I would say about this point.
You said earlier we moved forward. Are we moving back now, looking at one person in America who does not listen, who just says something and it has to be done? It has to be followed, and this entire culture. I came back last week. I had to go to Salzburg. Coming back, there had been border controls again, and I'm not entirely against border controls, but if they had not been there and they are reintroduced, and then they are reintroduced, especially as target against certain people, certain groups, and then one may wonder, I'm hesitating to say, well, we really moved forward. If I see the increasing, as well in Germany now, France, wherever you go, you have increasingly reactionary fascist, even fascist groups gaining ground. Is it for you discouraging or?
Peter, I will say to you, this is an important lesson, that some of these rights and privileges that we take for granted, must be protected, that we don't, take them for granted, as I said, because they could be easily lost. There is an African saying that one must be like a chameleon. One eye must look at the future and the other one must look at the past. So I say we need to learn from the past while looking forward and where we want to go as a people. There are definitely benefits for us working together as a global, in this global village, and for humanity, for us to grow. So I say we need to learn from our past mistakes so that we can move forward together. And some of these challenges we're experiencing today are a reminder of things, that can easily go wrong if we forget where we are coming from as a people. We should never forget where we come from. We should learn from our past so that, we can move forward towards a brighter future. This is what I would say,
Part of your personal past is some link to Germany.
Yes.
Meaning, if I understood it correctly, your father had been working there at some stage. So there may be some unconscious German influence. One of your mentors had been Germany from the university in Frankfurt, I think.
Yeah.
Then you have had a stipend from the German Research Society, and you worked at the Max Planck Institute, where we actually first met.
Yeah.
Is there this tradition in looking at law now?
Yeah.
There is this, I always say cautiously, the German is known for being the people of the Dichter and Denker, the poets and thinkers.
Yeah.
But it is as well the country of the Richter and Henker, the judges and hangmen.
Yeah.
And the German discipline, traditionally, now the trains don't go anymore on time, but there's this tradition of, I did a little study there that many international students actually, or students who go internationally, economics they do in the United States, law they do in Germany.
Yeah.
That's the kind of majorities. What does this tradition mean for you, this link to Germany?
Yeah. No, it means a lot to me. I'm really grateful. I'm so grateful, that I had that opportunity to study in Germany and learn about the German traditions, Peter, because it really sharpened my thinking about things, Indeed, the German law is close, to South African law. Although you have a civil, civil law, codified system, while we have the common law. But if you look at our labor law, there's a lot of similarities. You look at our Bill of Rights, there are also lessons from the German constitution and so on. So there are those connections, but also the way of thinking, in Germany that I found quite refreshing when I worked at the Max Planck. I came from the tradition of applied research and so on. And when I worked there at the Max Planck, and I considered Grundlageforschung, basic research, as a luxury research, because here we try to identify a problem and address it, real problems in real life. I was not really a big fan of basic research, but after spending time in Germany, I love it. It really sharpened the way I think, and so on. So it's really something that it stayed with me, and to this day, I feel so grateful that I interacted with scholars like yourself. I remember the debates we had about things, and since then, there have been a number of projects that we did. One resulted in a book with colleagues from the University of Bielefeld, where we look at the ideas behind, certain social security benefits and so on. We published a book with Routledge on that, and it forced me to go back 100 years, looking at our social security law. What were the ideas behind certain things? If we say, the age of eligibility for a social assistance benefit for the elderly is 60. What informed that, and what were the questions that the policymakers, the lawmakers wanted to address? To be honest with you, if it was not for my interactions with the German colleagues, I would have never thought of that. So it's always, challenging and refreshing, Well,
but you mentioned the interaction with German colleagues, and when we met there, it was interaction really with an international scholarship. There had been frequently guests from various countries. Myself coming from Ireland, actually, living in or having lived in a way as well in two worlds: the German law system, understanding of law, social law. In Ireland, law played in the social sector more a role for law of social workers, how to deal with clients and whatsoever in social policy teaching. This kind of may I say, community of the scientific community, which we met, which we experienced there at the Max Planck Institute. Is it?
Look, at that experience, Peter, I always say to my students that this is an experience that I wish all of them would have, because there, in as much as you are in Germany, learning about the German legal traditions, but you also have the benefit of meeting scholars from all over the world. We interacted with colleagues from Brazil. We interacted with you from, then you were based in Ireland. We interacted with colleagues from Japan, China, and of course, me from Africa. And I believe strongly that from that, the colleagues learned a lot from me, from my interventions in terms of our approaches, especially our constitutional court, which came up with amazing constitutional jurisprudence that, is embraced by the world, I remember our interactions, about equality, how this is framed and is being dealt with, coming from an apartheid era, and so on. But it was a mutual learning experience that I think the world needs. Today, you cannot be, like narrow-minded in terms of looking at your own system. There is so much to be learned from a comparative point of view. I mean, comparative approaches are extremely important, comparisons, and also bringing in the international, multi-national dimension, because I remember we always looked at the international instruments, international standards, which have been referenced a lot in our court cases, which I understand is different in countries like Germany. So you look at those different traditions, and also not forgetting the history. I really enjoyed learning about, the role Chancellor Otto von Bismarck played, in introducing social insurance, which has spread throughout the world. And I doubt many people enjoy social insurance, but they don't understand its origins. And now I also say, yes, it addressed challenges then, Some may not be relevant to the global south, but nothing prevents us in the global south to have our own Otto von Bismarcks, to bring in systems that speak to our challenges and help us take, our social security systems forward. So those type of thinking, and reflections, I wouldn't have had them had I not had that experience to interact with scholars like yourself in Germany and learn from the best, if I could put it that way.
It had been always a kind of struggle, a kind of conflict when Bismarck, what is known as Bismarckian social insurance system, actually I found out kind of accident when I worked on my PhD thesis, that it had been actually not Bismarck who initialized it, but it had been somebody with a strange name of Itzenplitz, who was trade minister.
Yeah,
and then he convinced Bismarck
Peter, I'm happy to learn that, but isn't it ironic that in life it's always like that, It's the boss that gets the credit.
Yeah, you mentioned, or it had been, well, you mentioned in your inauguration speech, future-centered and human-centered.
Yeah.
And I completely agree, and I think this is something where especially if we go this way, we have to do what you mentioned before, and what we are with our human rights group working on to try to understand the background from where it comes, not only from where it comes, but as well the different meaning. Talking about human rights in South Africa, in China, in Germany, in the United States means something very different. At the same time, there is this commonality, future-centered, human-centered. And then we have this multipolarity, monopolarity. And is that a conflict you can deal with in your teaching as well?
I think so. It's all about setting the scene right. That look at today. We've got 4IR technologies that are exciting everyone and so on. And people ask, are these technologies eroding who we are? And my argument is that in as much as we need to embrace them, we need to make sure that these technologies serve humanity and not the other way around. It should be for the betterment of the people. By being human-centric, it's more about what can these technologies do to address the challenges we are facing today, such as hunger, poverty, and so on. And the same as, the various rights that we have, how can they be used in a way that advances people? And rights, just like rights, human rights, may look like they contradict each other. But at the end of the day, if applied properly, they should complement each other. And if you want to ensure that there is that complementarity, one must always make sure that the way we use them to what goal, if they are used with the aim of improving lives for the betterment of humanity, then you find the middle ground through interpretation and application. So yes, it may seem like there is this contradiction, and yes, there are contradictions, but it's how you apply those. You look at, in my opinion, the end goal, which should be, the betterment of human beings, humanity, through what? Providing a life of dignity and so on. that one can, through application and interpretation, take us, from a bad situation to a better situation, not a worse situation.
Well, looking at your work, there are the two dimensions I want to discuss a little bit. The one is you are very much a teacher of law, legal issues, engaging with students, engaging with law shops, which perhaps we can expand a little bit on this. And at the same time, you are in a kind of more administrative And then you wrote two groups of works. The one is the standard academic work. And the other is this book on Santa Claus. And the book From Baobab to the Mosquito. Rethink Leadership Through African Sayings. In the book on Santa Claus, there is something, in academic terms, an accident happened, that there are actually two non-academics contributing to this book. I think it is great. Because, well, what you said, we can learn from students, we can learn from people working in the administration.
That's right.
At the same time, we are asked to write papers in important journals, the typical academic way. And I'm wondering, the law should be there for the people. To protect them, but as well to work towards a society that is human future centric. And at the same time, administrative laws are different. Students, what are your students? What is their main? What you say your experience? What is their main motivation to study law?
Look, let me start with the last question. I think people are motivated by different things, some may be motivated, like myself, I was motivated by, the dream of my father for me, but it's something that I fell in love with and later and enjoyed. Many of our students, it's about the betterment of their family circumstances, through the opportunities that being a law graduate brings. If you look at many of our students, they come from humble backgrounds, and through this type of qualification, one would hope that these are the people who would work in the legal field with a conscience, because they understand, what it means being the underdog in the society and so on, and of course, I mean, you also get some people who are inspired by what they see on television, so this shows lawyers as the glamorous people with big cars and so on. I hope they learn, and we try to change that, to show that law is about serving. We've got 3 law clinics, one is in Soweto, which is a township, and where they serve the local communities that do not have the resources, with legal services. And it's a life-changing experience for many of our students. It instills that thing at the back of their minds that there are people out there who struggle and who need legal services but do not have the means. Now, back to the first question, yes, Peter, lawyers are perceived to be sometimes these boring people who are serious, who do not have a sense of humor, and so on. And through some of these projects that are not your typical legal works, I try to show that lawyers, can have fun. The Santa Claus book, which is written mainly by lawyers, of course, there are 4 non-lawyers who contributed, also shows the fun side of lawyers, you know, and the book was well received, you know. In terms of bringing admin colleagues, I wish we could have had more non-academic colleagues contributing. But many, when I asked why they didn't contribute, they said they lacked the confidence, you know, to write something that would go side by side with that of the professors. But I hope through that work, others would gain confidence in future to be able to contribute to such works. Peter, my predecessor, the former president of the University of Johannesburg, and now the rector and Under-Secretary General of the United Nations University, Professor Chilitsi Marwana, sat down with me and shared something that stayed with me. He said, look, in my field, you know, that is my area of labor law and social security, people know me and probably respect me. But my work in that space stays there, you know. As academic leaders now, administrators, we have a duty to also make sure that our ideas are shared with your ordinary people, people who don't read legal texts that we write, you know. So we must be thought leaders, you know. Thought leadership is important. And as a result, I put together that book about rethinking leadership through African sayings to share my perspectives, you know, on leadership. And I'm a regular contributor to local newspapers, sharing my opinions on interesting issues, because really thought leadership is important. People want to hear from us as leaders in terms of what our thoughts are. I also publish bi-monthly an opinion piece in Forbes Africa, which is really an impressive publication that has got the reach throughout the African continent on typical issues. The latest, you know, I talk about human trafficking, you know, on the continent, which I believe is a serious issue. So, yes, I continue to contribute in the academic space, you know, my space as an academic, but increasingly, I also contribute in the space of thought leadership, so that I don't leave other people out who want to hear my thoughts as a leader of an important institution like the University of Johannesburg. So that is where these two come from, and I'll continue to build. It's not easy, but it's something that I find quite enjoyable, also based on the feedback that I've been receiving from people who are not in my area of scholarly interest, which is labor law and social security.
Can you say something about this practical dimension of, I think it's called law shops, where you engage, where your service, your legal service is actually provided to people who are not part of the mainstream with a suit and rich car?
Yeah. So as part of our legal education, if you pursue an LLB, after graduating with an LLB and after doing some going through some other requirements, professional body requirements, then you can practice law. So it is a requirement for those who are pursuing LLB to take part in a law clinic. We call it law clinic. And we've got law clinics at 3 of our campuses, where they are guided in terms of legal practice, and also consultations and service and helping the indigent. They work with professionals, lawyers that are admitted to practice law, and some of the cases end up in law free of charge to help the poor. So these law clinics serve the indigent, people who do not afford you know, the services of a lawyer, who cannot afford the services of a lawyer. And they get the free services, students working with professionals in the law clinic, providing legal advice. Some matters get solved, you know, early on, but some end up in court, and then the lawyers at the law clinic will take on that matter in a court of law. It's a valuable experience for our students. They are also assessed at the end of the year in terms of their performance at the law clinic. And when they go into practice, they already had that experience it's training, but at the same time, it's also providing valuable legal services. I mean, legal services are expensive. And that way, you know, we help people that would have not ordinarily had the opportunity to have their matters resolved. It's mainly civil matters. Some are solved, you know, early on, but some end up in court. Mm.
Is that the law clinics are only some additional training in law, or do you have something similar in other subject areas?
We have something in other fields. For example, we've got clinics that I used to train students by our optometry department, you know, where I get my eyes checked and my glasses, you know. So we have those. And in engineering, we also have students, you know, that would go out and do projects and so on. So it's something common at our university to ensure that students don't only learn in class, but they get that real life experience and exposure. We also have more in other faculties like humanities, you know, we also have in health sciences, Peter, podiatry, students also, we have a clinic, you know, radiography, we've got a clinic and so on. You know, where students can get experience, you know. Of course, it's done within the prescripts of the profession.
Well, I mentioned earlier my European engagement where somebody in the practice field said, actually, your university should pay us for having this or providing this space of experience.
Yeah.
As I said, I had been last week in Austria. There was something arts and science. And one topic came up, I mentioned in my presentation, what we need really is what had been called or is called polytechnical orientation of third level education, that people really go into the practice, into the field of practice and learn what it is about. This had been part in the GDR system. It existed. Doctors had to be trained, of course, in the medical profession as medical professionals, but as well they had to go to do jobs as nurses, as carers or whatsoever, that they see what it actually means. Looking at the situation now, I'm teaching law, I had been teaching social policy and economics. This is something, if you teach economics, you don't have to know about the economy of a country, you have to know the formulas and equations, and you have to be able to calculate. If it has to be, if it is linked to reality, it doesn't matter. So how can we get it back from your experience? You have it there, the law clinics. In other areas, how can we get this as a mainstream direction of higher education, that people have to work on practice? Do you have any ideas there?
Yeah, look, this should be compulsory, and this will require a partnership approach with industry, where industry works closely with institutions of higher learning, where we have people from industry being involved who bring that practical industry experience. That's why at the University of Johannesburg, we have the so-called professors of practice. These are not professors in the true sense of the word, but these are people who are industry leaders, you know, and who bring that industry experience to the university and engage with students. But it also requires students going out under guidance, dealing with real life situations, to learn about what is happening out there, so that when they go out, then they are fully prepared. And in this age of technology, this can also involve, as we see at the University of Johannesburg, using virtual reality and augmented reality to train students, you know, give them that hands-on approach. I'll give you an example. In mining, our School of Mining, which is celebrating its centenary this year, we have the simulacrum, which is set up in partnership with one of the leading mining houses in South Africa, Africa and the world, Sibanye Stillwater. Students can learn about mining. We've got a mine, actually, artificial mine, of course, a simulated mine at one of our campuses. The experience is real, Peter. It's like you have gone to a proper mine. And students can learn blasting using VR, virtual reality and augmented reality. And the beauty of it is that you can simulate all sorts of situations, and there is no risk towards the students, you know. There's no risks toward the students, because when they blast, they make a mistake, then they won't die, you know, but they can learn valuable lessons. So it's partnership approach with industry, students going to industry, so working with industry partners, but also industry leaders coming to universities, partnering with universities, and then universities and industry partners joining forces to set up, you know, learning spaces like this simulacrum that we have, using technology, imparting valuable skills, you know, to our students.
You mentioned, or it had been mentioned frequently in looking at what at your work and information about you, the Sustainable Development Goals,
Yeah.
And the Fourth Industrial Revolution. How would you assess the Sustainable Development Goals? Is that a valuable concept when we talk about enhancing human rights as well? Or is it just a technical issue?
Yeah, look, I think the Sustainable Development Goals are important, extremely important, and you know, it's something to be taken seriously, and we all need to work towards their realization, because through that is how you empower people, you address societal challenges. At my university, we take this very seriously, that to the point that we are ranked #1 in Africa and 36 in the world in terms of our contribution towards the realization of Sustainable Development Goals. Because look, it's about the environment, it's about the people, and so on. And without them, you know, I don't think people would be thinking seriously about these goals or measuring them. I'll give you an example. Just over 15% of our power, our energy, comes from solar, from renewable resource. You know, we're in the process of replacing, we operate 15 internal combustion buses that do inter-campus transfer of students. We're working hard towards displacing all of them with electric vehicle buses. At the end of this month, we'll be having 5, which means the diesel ones will be replaced. So really, these are important goals to work towards. I mean, addressing poverty, which is one of the serious challenges we are facing in the world. So I would urge everyone, you know, to pull resources together, including industry partners, you know, to work towards the realization of these goals. Development need not come at a huge price, you know, towards the sustainable development of the people, you know, the environment, you know, and so on. I believe development can be sustainable, and it could work towards the betterment of humanity, and that is how it should be.
I agree, and I don't want to be pessimist, but if I see especially the exploitation of global south in favor of environmental issues in the global north, using resources from the global south and basically destroying again the conditions there for their own sustainable development. How can we get to balance there?
Yeah, that is a problem. I mean, you know, we should not fix one problem by creating another. We need fair globalization. That is where fair globalization comes in, you know. If we fix one problem and creating another, then it becomes a vicious circle. And that is not sustainable, in my opinion.
But still, this is what happens. That's
Yeah.
mighty people, mighty countries actually move this way and say we don't bother as long as our cities are clean and our energy is clean. How to counter this? If I look now at the development as well, that the United States steps back from international programs and major industrial firms like Tesla explicitly, even within the countries of the global north, disrespect the rules of people. That's as well a short-term, long-term issue. The clean energy that was near to Berlin, Tesla site that used so much water locally that actually the population suffered and didn't have enough water. So that was a huge problem. And of course, the argument was, we get employment for you, and this is what you need. So just be happy and ignore what else we are doing. Law is always a matter of conflict and trying to find a solution there. Can we maintain law and strengthen law in this respect as well of sustainable development goals, human rights, understanding each other, and teaching this to the next generation?
Yeah, look, we need to strike a balance between the two so that the two work hand in glove, sustainable development without human rights, it's not development at all. It's not sustainable, in my opinion. And you reminded me of what my colleague in Slovenia once told me about, I think there's a brewery that came, and because, in beer brewing, you need clean water. And there was a right about the right to water that was inserted in the laws, that should there be a need for more water or shortage, water being provided to the people will be prioritized than water provided for beer brewing. And we need those type of laws that will make sure that development doesn't undermine human rights, such as access to clean water and so on.
Are we talking about human rights or the rights of humanity? The reason for asking this is that one of the mainstreams, the Western mainstream discussion is it's on individual freedom. That's about human rights. And as you just mentioned, water, I listened once to an interview with one of the CEOs of Nestle or Unilever or whatever, and he said, it is our right as internationally operating corporation, it is our right to privatize water. And if people cannot afford it, bad luck. And he said this in a publicly available interview.
Wow.
What is about law then? If people can insist on their individual rights or the rights of the individual corporation, and actually, yes, that's a human right, but it's not the right of humanity to how to survive with what you say, without clean water, without being able to look after basic needs.
Yeah. Look, Peter, when you look at the jurisprudence of our constitutional court here in South Africa, you'll pick one thing. Of course, individuals have got rights, including persons have got rights, including your corporations, at the same time, there are rights that are enjoyed by a collective. And in the interpretation of these rights, the court invariably prioritized the rights of a collective over the rights of an individual. And I think in our interpretation and application of human rights, we should prioritize the interests of a collective over those of an individual. I think that is what would solve this issue.
Well, we could go on endlessly. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
And I take this last remark just as one of continuing cooperation, operation. And now I wish you and your students and your colleagues first best of luck, and thanks very much for joining, and hopefully we will stay in touch and work together. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. Thanks for having me. And until next time, we'll definitely continue working together, no doubt. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.